And then law number 5, the law of receptivity, says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving, which really is nothing more than understanding that, yeah, you breathe out, you also have to breathe in. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. The challenge is the world around us doesn't give us that message. The world around us provides us with so many lack messages, so many anti-prosperity messages that, it can really get into a person's head. They do not allow themselves to really embrace the natural riches and wealth.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Bob Burg. Bob is the president of Burg Communications, a keynote speaker, and the author of several best-selling books, including the million-copy bestseller, The Go-Giver. He also hosts seminars for sales executives, including the Mastermind Retreat and SalesWise Live. And he hosts the Go-Giver podcast and the Go-Giver blog. You can learn more about Bob at burg.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Bob.
Bob, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thank you, Jeff. Great to be with you.
Very honored. Oh my goodness. Read your book in 2014. I had one networking meeting with an introduction. Gary Hawkins, he ran a accounting CPA company. And Gary and I have never talked since. I've written him thank you notes. I've tagged him on LinkedIn. But he gave me a gift at the end of the conversation, meaning go read The Go-Giver. And since then, it's been my most gifted book to many people.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate Gary.
I'd love to just talk a little bit. We're going to talk about the book because it's had a big influence on my life, and I reread it for probably for the 5th time for our call today, just to, so, ready to go. But, I love, I think you wrote Endless Referrals back in 1994. So that was kind of your first, at least successful book. I don't know if you wrote any before that. And then, going on your LinkedIn, Burg Communications, your company has been around, 34 and a half years, give or take. So, you had to be in like your early 30s or 30 when you kind of branched out on your own. And what was the impetus to that?
So I'd been in sales and had enjoyed it a lot. I was sales manager of a company for a while, and I started to. So I guess what really happened is I had taken my crew to a sales center. It was a Zig Ziglar and a guy named Billy Burden, and Billy was teaching a memory course. This was back in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I love Zig.
Yeah, Zig. Oh, Zig was the best. Of course, I got their tape back then. That's how long ago this was. It was tapes, the cassette
Right.
tape. Of course, I actually had Zig. No, I got Zig's there. I had another one of Zig's, and I bought Billy Burton's. And Billy's was it was a memory course actually on how to remember names, how to remember facts, figures, what you read, how to give talks, presentation, all these things, and which I really needed because I was horrible with memory and all that stuff. So I got Billy's stuff. And I really worked at it and got good at it and turned a real weakness into a strength of mine. In the back of Billy's, the he had, the cassettes, but then he had a big notebook type of thing,
Right.
the whole thing. And it said, if you want to make some extra money speaking and distributing these tapes, call our office. So I did and talked to them, and I actually went down to their office in Dallas and signed up, and they taught me how to give like 25 30-minute talks at every type of civic club, group, organization, and then how to sell his tapes at the end. So you'd speak for free and then sell the tapes. And apparently, from what they say, I was their leading sales guy. Because I
Wow.
was, yeah. And so, I mean, I just listened to what they said. I wouldn't have known how to do it, but I just tapped into, I'm a big believer in learning systems, right, and so forth, not trying to invent them. My personal definition of a system is simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles, the key being predictability. So if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. And I remember seeing Billy at the program where I was, and his was more than a half an hour, but he did it so expertly, and the way he taught what he was teaching, and then did the sale at the end and everything, and everybody was buying. Okay, I want to imitate him. I want to follow his system, and I did, and so that's what happened. But so I sort of morphed into wanting to speak on that topic because I started studying everything I could on it, got pretty knowledgeable. So for about the first 5 years of my speaking career, I was simply teaching courses on memory improvement, and so that's kind of how, but really my forte in terms of when I built my sales business was in the networking, referrals, relationship creation aspect. And so I kind of morphed out of the memory thing and into what was really my fastball, was
Right.
really, and that's really how that stuff started. I didn't necessarily know I was going to be a speaker for the next 40 years. I just thought it was like pretty cool to do.
Yeah, no, it's great. And we were in that generation too, where, the previous work generation, our parents per se, if they did work in corporate America, they worked, 30 years for AT&T and got the gold watch and or whatever, so, going to business for yourself, I mean, was rarer in that generation, right? So you talk about there was a drive-by mentor you had that changed your whole perspective and had a big role in your success.
Yeah.
Can you tell the listeners about that story?
Yeah, so a drive-by mentor is a term that I don't know if I coined it or not, or it might have been one of my mentors, another person. Her name is Dondi Scumaci, and she's out of Texas, another person out of Texas, but she's fantastic. And we were talking once about people who made big differences in our lives, and so I think it was probably her who coined the term. And these are people, drive-by mentors are people who you may not have, any kind of relationship with them. You may know them just to say hello or whatever, or you may never have seen them before. But at a certain time, they said something that you needed to hear, and you happened to be open to receiving what they were saying, and made a huge difference in your life. And you may never have seen them again, maybe never talked to them again, or about that particular thing, but it just happened to be the timing was perfect for what they said and what you needed. So I'd been in sales for a couple of years after learning about sales, had done well at it. And then I went to another company selling a high ticket item, and I started out in a slump, and I stayed in a slump, and I was making a young salesperson's mistake. The longer the slump I was in, the more of a slump I was in, the more I was focused just on getting out of the slump. And as you know, that's totally counterproductive because you're focused just on yourself as opposed to taking care of your customers and clients. And people don't buy because, you have a quota to meet. They don't buy because you want to get out of a slump, and they don't buy because you need the money and would like the sale to happen. People buy because they believe that they will benefit, that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so, which is the only reason anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. But so I remained in this slump. And then there was a guy at the company where I worked. He was not in the sales department. I think he was an engineer. He was an older guy. I think he retired soon afterwards, actually. He didn't say much, but he was one of those people who, we've all known people like this. Whenever they did say something, it was typically very profound. And so when he asked me if he could give me some advice, and I think he saw me as sort of like Joe in The Go-Giver that I would write about with John David Mann 15, 20 years later after that, or 25 years after that. I think he saw me as that kind of young, up and coming, ambitious, aggressive, good kid, but whose focus was in the wrong place. And so when he asked if he could give me some advice, I said, absolutely, please do. I need it. And he said, Burg, he was a last name kind of guy. He said, Burg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget that the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And what that said to me right there was that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson, right? Great salesmanship is never about the product or service, as important as those are. It's not what the sale is about. Great salesmanship is about that person, that other person who you're trying to add value to. Or I guess even more accurately, we could say it's about that person whose life becomes better just because you are part of it. And I think if we come at sales from that foundational premise, if you will, we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game. And I think it's the same with leadership, right? Great leadership's never about the leader, right?
Exactly. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so, you were in the slump, and again, Gary Hawkins was that drive-by mentor for me, right? And I think he realized, so I was in a job search at the time, and I was in so many job searches. This is 2014, and I got introduced to actually to Gary by the person in Kansas City that's called the Connector, Frank Benura, who's also a good friend.
I know Frank Benura.
Yeah, Frank's called the Connector. He introduced me to Gary, and Gary probably sensed from me, I was in a slump from a perspective of, I just got my position eliminated with another executive. There was only two of us, and here we go. And this is my 8th or 9th job transition involuntarily. He probably sensed, I needed a gift to read your book, The Go-Giver, and that's what I do to a lot of people. I feel that, especially job seekers, read this book because it'll change your perspective, because nobody has a job for you. You can only add value to somebody, and you can get their insight and their about people and companies and what their career, but no one has a job for you. It puts them on angst. So I think it was similar. You were in the sales slump. I needed income slump, a job. But I know not everyone has read The Go-Giver, so talk about the basic premise of the book.
Yeah. No, it's simply that shifting your focus, and I think, Jeff, this is really where it all begins, right? It's shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical, type of reasons. No, not at all. It actually is very logical. It's very rational. When you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on serving others. Again, whether we're talking sales or leadership, right? When you're that person, when you can move from an I focus or me focus to an other focus, people feel good about you. They feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be a part of your life. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell the world about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. So, that's really where it all begins.
In the book, you go through the 5 laws that you and your co-author, John David Mann, came up with. Maybe give a quick review of what those 5 laws are, again, for the people that have not read the book or want a refresher.
Sure. So the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value is really about providing such a wonderful, powerful experience with that person at every single touch point. So that when we're talking in the sales vernacular, it means that person, by the time they buy from you, they feel as though they're receiving much more in overall value than what they're paying, while you make a very healthy profit. The law of compensation says your income is determined by how many people you serve, as well as how well you serve them. So where law number 1, the focus is on the value itself, law number 2 says that's great, but it's also a matter of how many lives you impact, right? Directly and or indirectly, with the exceptional value you're providing. Law number 3, the law of influence, says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. No, not in a way that's doormatty or martyrish or self-sacrificial, not at all. It's simply understanding that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to, and we could add, allow themselves to be led by those people they know, like, and trust. And here's the thing, there's no faster, more powerful, more effective way of eliciting those feelings toward you in others than by genuinely moving from that I or me focus to that other focus. Or as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, the protege, make your win all about the other person's win. Law number 4, the law of authenticity, says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. In this part of the story, Deborah shared that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are all indeed very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, not only do people feel good about you, they feel comfortable with you, they feel safe with you. And why wouldn't they? They know, who they're getting. And it's a very powerful element of human nature that we want to make sense of our world. This in a world that often doesn't make a lot of sense.
For me, that was the funniest part of the book, that Deborah's all the different closes, and then she went in alphabet A to Z. I mean, that's I laugh every time I read that. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. John wrote those up, and I was like, how does this guy come up with this stuff? But yeah, I know.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
Here's the thing regarding authenticity, because I think people have sort of misconstrued it I think really since social media has come into play, because authenticity has come to mean no boundaries. Just say or do whatever you want, say whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, and don't worry about it anywhere because it's authentic. And I don't really agree with that. I don't buy into that, Jeff. That's it's sort of like the guy who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell at people a lot, and if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me. No, that's malarkey. It simply means that person has an authentic problem that they need to authentically work on in order to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves. So we never want to confuse authenticity with not growing, right? But instead use authenticity as a component of growth, as a motivation to become your best, the best you can be, the best authentic you. Personally, I define authenticity simply as acting congruently with your values. And I think as long as you do that, you're on the right track and you're, authentic. And then law number 5, the law of receptivity, simply says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving, which really is nothing more than understanding that, yeah, you breathe out, you also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. The challenge is the world around us doesn't give us that message. The world around us provides us with so many lack messages, so many anti-prosperity messages that it can really get into a person's head, and they do not allow themselves to really embrace the natural riches and wealth, not even just financially, although financially too, but I guess you could say the overall abundance that they deserve. And that's why we've got to really watch the messages that we receive from the world around us, question premises, and ask ourselves, well, why is this true? It's like that old question, if you were ever asked when you were a young kid, hey, when you grow up, do you want to be, wealthy or happy? Right?
Right.
Now, if you buy into that false premise, you're in trouble. The answer, of course, is yes, both. But that's not the message we see from the world around us. So I think it's very important to make a study of prosperity thinking and read and learn. There's people like Randy Gage and Sharon Lechter and Ellen Rogan and David Nagel, Bob Proctor, Ken Honda. These are people who speak, they write, they blog, they post on prosperity. And I think it's so important to read their blogs, watch their videos, go to their talks. Why? Because it's totally opposite of the anti-prosperity messages we receive from the world around us all over. And we get that garbage coming in all the time. Just, check X or any of the other social media platforms. So we need to really understand that we live in an abundant universe, an abundant world, but we need to be able to be open to that and be open to that receiving.
So based on what you have just said about the law of receptivity, do you think that one is the hardest law for people to implement?
Yeah, based on the feedback John and I receive, and based on our lives and the lives of most people we know. That's a struggle, right?
Right.
And I think it's I think it's constant work in progress. But yeah, that's a hard. It's a very difficult one for people. I can't tell you how many people have said and how many people have written. So, oh yeah, the first four laws, boom, easy. That law of receptivity, that's a tough one, right?
Right.
And you notice it even with people, and we say, well, how do you become more receptive? Well, first, it's, I think, understanding and acknowledging the difficulty with it, okay? Because we cannot overcome a problem that we don't realize we have. So you've got people sabotaging themselves and sabotaging their prosperity throughout their entire lives, never even knowing that that's what they're doing, right?
Right.
Because remember, what have we, everything we hear from the moment we're born, whether it's through upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television, movies, whatever, there's these horrible anti-prosperity messages. That's unconscious. We take that in, but it goes down into the unconscious, right? And in our unconscious is what drives us, not the conscious. So yeah, we've got to first understand it. And then again, the next step is to study prosperity. Don't study lack, study prosperity. But then the third is to build on your small successes, continue to practice. For example, when someone pays you a compliment, and we're going to assume here it's a appropriate compliment. Okay, somebody pays you a compliment. If you've ever had the natural reaction of, oh no, right? Well, that's not building your prosperity muscle. So when you can instead say, oh, thank you, that's very kind. Boom, you've just started on the path to prosperity, right? Someone opens the door instead of saying, oh yeah, door for you, instead of saying, oh no, so, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. When some money comes in, just thank God or thank the universe, however you want to do it, and say thank you, right? More money comes in, same thing. Or and that's how we build those prosperity muscles. We don't try to, we build on our small successes and keep expanding.
Talk a little bit more about money, because in the book, it says, for somebody to do something, Joe in this case, the first question is, does it make me money? Right? And it's in the book, it's a great question. It's just a bad first question. But if you're, like an entrepreneur, and that's, your pre-revenue, or even, somebody in a job search, right? And they're the main breadwinner of a family, and, to have that mindset, I mean, what advice or how would you react to that question?
Yeah, because the person might say, well, yeah, but the money is important. Well, first of all, yeah, of course it's important. That's not, and again, the question, will it make money, is a great question. Just a bad first question. Why? Let's look at human nature. We go back to what we were talking about earlier, that nobody's going to buy from you because you need the money. No one's going to hire you because you need a job. So no, it's not a matter of will it make money. The first question has to be, will it provide value? Right? That person's
Right.
going to hire you because they believe that hiring you is going to provide value to them. And that makes sense. So the first question has to be, does it serve? Okay, you could say, is there a marketplace for it? Is this service or my services needed? Will it add value to others? That's got to be the first question. That's got to be your focus. Now, if the answer to that is yes, now you ask, okay, will it make money? Or, will I be paid appropriately, or whatever the question is? Yeah. So that's, yeah. But again, that's understanding human nature, and that's understanding the way things are. The giving comes before the receiving. The focus must be on the value. It's laws of nature. It's economic nature. It's human nature. It's physical nature, right? You plant before you harvest, right? You
Right.
sow before you reap. At the beginning of the story, Pindar says to Joe, some people approach a fireplace with the attitude of, first you give me some fire and some heat, then I'll throw on some logs and newspaper and light a match. Doesn't work that way. Imagine opening up a new account at the bank and saying, I'm thinking of opening up an account, but first I'd like you to give me an interest payment. Then I'll open an account and put in some money. Life doesn't work that way. And
Right.
those who kind of refuse to live in truth tend to not be as successful.
another misconception could be too, like, hey, if I'm a go-giver and I'm constantly giving, can I be taken advantage of, right? And Adam Grant's great book, Give and Take, which I read just recently, actually, talks about that. The givers with a specific mindset are the most successful people, but the least successful are givers that get taken advantage of. So maybe you can kind of talk about your thoughts on that.
Being a go-giver, Bob, can you get taken advantage of? Okay, so let me answer it a couple of ways. First, sure, because anyone can be taken advantage of, right? I mean, but if we're talking about a pattern of being taken advantage of, right? Uh, Now you've got to ask why that is, right? And here's what I say to people, if you are a giving person and you find yourself constantly and consistently taken advantage of, it's not because you're a giving person. It's because you're doing things in a certain way that is creating the environment for you to be taken advantage of. Okay. Because there's nothing, and I think this is so important to understand, there's nothing about being a go-giver that is congruent with being, again, a doormat, a martyr, self-sacrificial, or being taken advantage of. So if you're constantly being taken advantage of, there's a reason for it. You're doing things in a certain way. Now, why? I don't know, but I'll guarantee you it's unconscious. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I wonder if I can find some people to take advantage of me today.
Right.
So it's unconscious, but there is a payoff.
Right.
Whatever that payoff happens to be. It might be this person uh, on a certain level, again, always unconscious, but on a certain level, revels in being the victim. People can feel sorry for them. That's how they kind of get attention. Or it's their excuse for not being more successful and doing more what they need to do. Well, I'd be successful, but I just give myself away and people take advantage of it, right? And all those things.
Right.
So got to be able to go deeper and understand what is it that is driving me on an unconscious level to think and act that way. One of my favorite books that made a huge difference for me in my life was called Psycho-Cybernetics. It was written by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. It was written, published, I believe, in 1960. And that was the first book that showed me it is our unconscious that absolutely dictates what our actions are going to be. And we can never achieve more than our most limiting beliefs. And again, those beliefs are unconscious.
Right.
So, so if someone finds himself being taken advantage of like that, they need to ask themselves why, and they need to discover, maybe with some help, and whether it's seeing a counselor or a coach or whatever, but they need to understand what it is and why it is that they are doing that to themselves and creating that environment for people to take advantage of them. What Adam basically said in his book, were like the most successful people are givers and the least successful people are givers. The successful givers, they give in a way that benefits everyone involved. The unsuccessful givers were the self-sacrificial
Right.
people, right? Right. And so sure. So yeah, there's nothing about being a go-giver that would equate with being taken advantage of.
I believe the five laws are immutable. But you wrote the book in 2007, and now it's 17 years later. And any difference you see, or any advice for like kind of today's generation of leaders reading it for the first time? Is there any difference or anything else you would want to tell them?
Well, I mean, there's nothing different in terms of the principles involved, because principles by the very nature of the thing are immutable, but there's always strategies and tactics and technique and the different things that we can utilize in order to make life better, in order to bring more value, in order to to benefit, in order to do that. So I mean, I think it's always a matter of continuing to learn and continuing to invest in ourselves and growing. But yeah, I mean, those principles, as John and I used to say, when we'd be interviewed, when the book first came out, because it got off to a pretty good start, and we'd be interviewed and say, so what have you two, what are these, what's in these five laws? It's any different from what, has always been true. And we'd always say nothing. I mean, we put it in story form with John's expert writing, and we name them certain things, but no, there's nothing different. These are the things
it's 122 pages of magic, really, when you read it. So, Bob, thanks so much for being on the Corporate Couch today. I'm honored, and what you're doing for people and have done for the past, 35 plus years is so great. So thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I guess I'm all fanboy over having the legendary Bob Burg, the co-author of one of my favorite books of all time, The Go-Giver, on the podcast.
That had to be an experience.
Oh, I love it. Bob's just so good. We mentioned some Kansas City legends, Harry Campbell and Frank Bernard, the Kansas City connector.
Oh, I know Frank. It's like, oh.
Of course he does. He talked about the drive-by mentor, and, I talked about Gary Hawkins, who Frank Bernard, the connector in Kansas City, introduced me to. And, Gary gave me a gift, and that was go read The Go-Giver. And I think that's why I have gifted that book the most. And I'm very empathetic to job seekers that, after, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years at a company, they get let go. Mm-hmm. Shit happens, rifts, layoffs, company gets purchased, they relocate the headquarters, all that shit that happens. As well as recent college graduates, because no university really teaches someone how to go about approaching the job search and building relationships. So I always recommend The Go-Giver because it helps putting you in a different mindset. And it's all about mindset. It's how can I add value to companies or people and build the relationships to get to companies you want to work for. In one of my job searches, I was at Lee Heck Harrison. They're an outplacement company that many companies use after they do a layoff, and and we met every Wednesday, and there was this guy that I became friends with, but he was like distraught. He was going, I can't get a job, and yada yada. I called him afterwards, because I wasn't going to say anything in this group of 30 people. I just said, look, do something for somebody today. You're all about yourself. Like, go drive through Starbucks and buy the coffee for the car behind you. But or something. I don't know. Reread The Go-Giver. It's going to put you in a different mindset because you control adding value to people. You don't control the sale. You don't control if somebody's going to hire you. You can only control the value you add to that person. So I love the book. I still gift it. But enough about me. I can talk all day long about Bob and The Go-Giver. So what are your thoughts, Joe?
It was an amazing interview. And I tell you this, most of the regular listeners to the Corporate Couch know that I'm not only a co-host, but I'm the audio editor for the Corporate Couch. So I get raw files from Zoom from the interview that happens. And my job as the audio editor is to make both the host and the guest sound good.
And I really appreciate that.
It's exactly what it is. Make the host and the guest sound good. And I've got a lot of different technical things that I can do to cause that to happen. I love it. I absolutely love it when you have as a guest a professional speaker because it makes my job so much easier. When I started listening to Bob talk, I realized I'm just going to let the tape run. There's not much I can or need to do with this. And I did less editing on this interview than I have on just about any of the other 100 interviews that we've done before. Please book more professional speakers because they are a delight to interview. As opposed to some other people where I just have to work the living daylights out of them to make them sound good. It's amazing. One of the things that he said was actually a little piece of advice that I've been using my entire life. And I can't remember if I heard it from my mother or where it was, but he said that if you don't know what to say, if you've been given a legitimate, sincere compliment, especially, and you don't know how to react to it, the one thing that you can always say, and it's always appropriate, are the words, thank you. That's all you need to say, and then just shut up. And I've always held that as a truth in my life, is that if somebody gives me a compliment and I sense that it is sincere, but it may not be exactly true. In other words, I may not have actually done as good of a presentation or as good of a meeting or whatever, but somebody comes up to me and says that was a good job or something like that. The two words that come out of my mouth is thank you, and then my mouth is sealed shut, because anything that you would say after that,
receive the compliment, the law of receptivity, right?
And allow them the ability to know that that was appreciated. And that just sort of ends the conversation right there. And then you can go on to the next thing that you've got to say. So if you don't know what to say, just say the words thank you, and then book more professional speakers, because I love it.
Joe, what leadership advice, go-giver leadership advice, would you want to impart on our great listening audience today?
We are going to go to that great go-giver philosopher named Stephen Wright, who one time very wisely said, when everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.